The 70s were a pretty crazy period, and sometimes a band would come in to do an interview off their trolley. On a Saturday night, you could go to a place like the Venue in St Kilda, and it'd be midnight oil in excess metal as anything.
Triple M Footy.
BT, Sam Newman, Luke Tunnicliffe, James Brayshaw, Steve Pritchard, and Eddie McGuire. They shaped the way the Triple M football ended up and the direction in which it now ultimately sits and continues to evolve.
In the house today, guys, we have a very, very special guest. He is an Australian Radio Hall of Famer. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Simon, welcome to the dos&d show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We're very excited to have you, mate. It's we've been trying to find a contact for a long time for you, and we're very privileged to chat and reflect.
Hard man to get a hold of.
Hard man to get a hold of. But very excited to chat with you over the next hour or so. But at the moment, what are you kind of doing in your world?
Whatever I want, basically. I retired a long time ago, 2018. So to a great extent, every day is a Saturday. I'm busy when I want to be and not busy when I don't. I don't miss my job. I miss a lot of the people that I work with, and others I don't miss. Sort of everyone heads off in their separate ways. And something I did in the lead up to walking away from it all was to distance myself as much as I could, try to get that work-life balance moved around so that I didn't define myself as much as I used to by my job. A different circle of friends, none of whom are in the radio business or the music business. And we just pot around doing what we being Jan and I, my wife and I. We travel as much as we can. And keep busy and enjoy life.
Do you still keep a pretty close eye as a music fan on the music scene?
I do, but kind of in my own wheelhouse. I can watch the arias and have no idea who 90% of the people are who are nominated or being awarded with stuff. And I don't care that much about that. The fact that I don't know who they are. I stumble across things from time to time. I picked up a musical instrument when I retired, and I do a lot of that with another mate of mine who also did the same thing, similar age, similar situation. Have too much money to spend on musical instruments, so we indulge ourselves in that.
That's great.
And love doing that. We get together every week, Bob and I, either at his place in Ringwood or at our place in Richmond, and play a lot of music and talk shit all day. And that's good, and love doing that.
That's amazing.
Like going to gigs a lot, and that's about it. Life's good.
Well, I'm guessing you've been to a few gigs over the journey, which we'll dive into very shortly. Just on that, what are you playing at the moment? What kind of genre of music? What kind of instruments? What are we talking?
I play bass.
Yep.
I've always loved bass and drums. Anytime I've gone to a gig, my focus tends to be on the rhythm section or that part of it, rhythm guitar as well. And so that's what I play, pretty poorly, but that's okay. I know what I'm doing, and it kind of resembles what it is that it's meant to be. And I've some beautiful instruments, which I love playing. And in terms of what we play, pretty much everything. Every now and then we'll discover a band from ages ago and devour their stuff. Went through a Radiohead stage recently. Love country music, which I never did.
Right.
So anything that Chris Stapleton's ever done or whatever, love that. Went to the concert. Bought tickets, which is something I never used to do, and actually paid the Deluxo tickets.
Oh, you got the VIP.
Sorry?
You got the VIP.
Did all that, not the get a hat and meet and greet and all of that, but nice and close. So I love doing that. Pretty much everything, as well as old classic rock. Love the Beatles. Paul McCartney, a bit of a hero of mine, obviously, with the instrument that I attempt to play. So ploughing my way through all of those. Lots of different things. I think people would be surprised at what it is that we play. We also have this thing of whenever somebody dies, we play their stuff. So last week it was some Beach Boys stuff. And on and on and on it goes.
Nice.
So we pay our own little tribute and bid farewell to somebody who was a big deal to us.
Yes.
You're sounding busy, to be honest.
Well, as I said before, busy when I want to be and
Yeah.
not busy where we don't. Got a couple of gorgeous little granddaughters now, and we spend as much time with them as we can, and that keeps you young. It's a whole different sort of love. I don't know how many grandparents you guys get to interview, but you love your children, but there's a different sort of love for your grandchildren. You don't love your children less, but you love your grandchildren different.
Yeah.
And we spend as much time as we can with them as well. No, never sitting there drumming my fingers mentally on the table thinking, oh, what will I do now? I'm bored. Never bored.
That's good.
Always something to do.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about your story and what you've done across your career, but we were just talking off air. I'd love you to take us back, actually before we were born, I'd love you to take us back to kind of Melbourne in the 70s and 80s, and particularly the music scene, just to set the scene for this kind of episode. What was it like back then compared to nowadays in terms of live music and acts?
There was lots of it to start with, and I was born in 1953. While you're sitting there doing the maths. I'm 72 this year. I'll save you the trouble. So my musical journey actually started in the early 60s. One, with piano lessons, and that was classical music, which didn't interest me a whole lot, sort of sitting there plodding away. But then the Beatles arrived, and my world changed totally. Ozzy Osbourne once put it really well. He said the 50s was a little bit black and white. It was the post-war era. And then the Beatles came along and the world turned into colour. And the 60s was just a great era to grow up, to be going to high school during that period, seeing bands during that time. Pretty much every suburban town hall had bands playing on a Saturday night. There were under 18 versions. I used to go to Q Club at Q Town Hall, grew up in North Balwyn. And seeing bands like the Loved Ones and others at that time. Loved music, loved listening to radio as well. 3UZ was my station of choice in the 60s, and people like Stan Rofe, who I got to work with in the 70s. So got to meet my heroes, and that thing of never meet your heroes never applied with any of them. It was just awesome to work with these guys. The music scene was very busy. Pub rock had started to emerge. Australian bands were cropping up everywhere. You were never short of a band or a venue to go and watch a band play live. A lot more than exists now. And the disco era in the late 70s and early 80s got rid of a lot of live rock. Instead of having a band on stage, there'd be a DJ in a corner playing records or hitting spacebar on their laptop or whatever it is that they do.
That started in the 70s, is that?
Well, the late 70s,
Yeah.
it started to happen. With the Bee Gees and the movie Staying Alive kind of started that going, more so in the 80s, but it had certainly made itself ominously apparent towards the late 70s. But there were lots of great Australian bands. They were all legendary. You can rattle them all off, whether it was the more glammy side of it, whether it was incredibly successful bands like Sherbet, Skyhooks, the rock bands, whether it was Cold Chisel later in the 70s. Earlier, there were music festivals like the Sunbury festivals, for example. 3 days of music non-stop. There was lots of music on the radio and everywhere you went. In the suburbs, in the city, you couldn't avoid it.
It sounds like, and from what, my parents have told me, music was so accessible. As in, these great Australian bands were playing in their local pubs,
They were.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
Now, it's a lot of the bigger artists or even medium to larger size artists. It's not pubs, it's stadiums or it's, bigger kind of tours. But jealous of my parents. They go to their local pub and they've got, In Excess playing, at one stage, that's just insane.
And that is what it was like. And for example, on a Saturday night, you could go to a place like the Venue in St Kilda and it'd be Midnight Oil, In Excess, Metal as Anything. All three of which had songs being played on the radio a lot. There were bands. If you're talking about the difference between then and now, bands for days. It's not like bands don't exist anymore, but there are nowhere near as many. Solo artists are the ones who now dominate the charts. who dominate live performances. You know, whether it's who's been here recently, I don't know, Taylor Swift, you know, obviously a total phenomenon. Ed Sheeran, Katy Perry recently, Pink, 17 Rod Laver arenas. Bands struggle to pull that sort of crowd, unless you're a Foo Fighters or one of the heritage acts. Paul McCartney's 100 years old and he's still touring. AC/DC has just been announced, even though really it's one original member, Angus, and you've got to give credit to Brian Johnson, who's been in the band for, 45 years now. But the rest are other guys. Those shows will sell out and people will have a ball there, but they're few and far between. There were gigs everywhere. Very long answer to your question, sorry.
No, it's great.
No, we love it. So in terms of when you reflect back on it, are there any ones that stand out, like performances you've seen for any reason in terms of just blowing your mind as either a young person or whatever, just something you haven't seen before? Does anything...
Look, I've been asked that a lot, and I can never think of anybody in particular. The first band I saw playing live was the Purple Hearts, a Brisbane band that had band members in it like Lobby Lloyd, who went on to be in other bands that you wouldn't have heard of. And so seeing that band, and that was at Moomba, by the banks of the river. At Moomba one day, there was a band playing live. I was, 13 or so. So they stick in my head. I went and bought their records and did all of that. The first big gig I went and saw, which would have been probably at Festival Hall, but I can't remember who it was. There have been lots along the way over a very long period of time. The first time I saw the Rolling Stones was amazing. Never got to see the Beatles, very jealous of my sister who went to see them, but I went and saw Paul McCartney, and that was close. Huge fan, obviously. But any one that sticks out? No, lots do for lots of different reasons.
You obviously had such an incredible career, which involved interviewing, some of these the biggest names in rock and roll across the world. But would love to know the start. Your first opportunity, and your passion obviously for music came in so young. Was that always what you wanted to do for a career? Is find a path in radio somehow?
No. Like many others, radio was sort of this thing that you listened to, but it was kind of this magic land, and I was unaware until I got into it how many people work in radio within a radio station. You grow up, you listen to the radio, and it's the person on air. That's pretty much it, and you have your own mental picture of the room that they're in and the environment and the vibe, and what they look like. You often had no idea what they were like, and then you'd meet them somewhere and they were taller, shorter, or had a moustache, or had dark hair or light hair or whatever. In later years, I stopped tours through the radio station because more often than not, when a group of people would come to, is that what the studio looks like?
Disappointment, or
not disappointed only in that it wasn't what they thought it was going to look like. Also, what do these hundreds of other people do? So radio journalism, marketing, engineering, copywriting, management, sales, promotions. There's the on-air part is tiny. The journalists, there are so many people, and we're all interdependent. Nobody can do their job without the other departments. But in my case, I was headed towards a career in finance. My dad's thing was go where the money is. So I did accounting and economics poorly. I wasn't interested in it. But my first proper job when I finished school was working at the ANZ Bank. And I worked there for 4 weeks before I got into radio. The ANZ Bank had a training place in the city, and at lunchtime I'd sort of wander around, go and get a sandwich somewhere, and I walked past 3AW. And they had a sign in the front window that said 3AW Radio School, 6-week course, 2 nights a week, inquire within. I inquired within, started the next course, which started about a week later, and 3 weeks into that, I was offered a job at AW. 3 of their panel operators were conscripted, and they approached myself, a guy called Gordon Rose and a guy called John Kitson, Can't believe I remember their
I
names.
was just thinking that.
And
Wow.
we were all at the radio school, but doing something else. This was just something we did because I was interested in the technical side. The on-air bit had never occurred to me. I've always been a bit of a tech nerd, a bit of a geek when it comes to technology. I still am.
So is that like sound engineering kind of?
Yeah, audio engineering.
Yeah.
I used to do the lighting and sound for our school productions. I got a job at Camberwell Town Hall when it opened, working in the bio box there. I loved operating desks and was really interested in audio in particular. I was also had kind of half a vibe to get into television as a cameraman. Went for an interview at one point and did, I thought, really well. And the guy said, what sort of camera do you have? I said, well, I don't. I use Dad's camera. Oh, and what's that? Oh, I don't know. It's just a camera. And you're applying to be a cameraman. And it was then I realised that interview wasn't going as well. So anyway, did this course. They asked 3 of us if we wanted to become panel operators. This was a Thursday night. And I said, oh, can I have a think about it? And the guy said, no, give us an answer because if any of you 3 say no, we'll go to others. So I said yes. And so did the other 2 guys. And I said, when do we start? What do we do? You start Monday. So this was Thursday. You start Monday. So I went home. I was still living at home in North Baldwin. I was earning $44 a week at the ANZ Bank. Bought a house, bought a car. No.
Set up.
And I said to Mum and Dad, I've accepted a job at 3AW. And they said, oh, yeah, doing what? I said, as a panel operator. Is that what you want to do? And this is Greek parents, not your traditional Greeks. It is what I want to do. I think it's what I want to do. Well, good luck. Dad, straight away. And what are they paying you? I said, $24 a week. What? $24 a week. I didn't hear $24 a week. So half the pay. And then turned up at the ANZ Bank the following day and said, I quit. And they said, well, you have to give 2 weeks' notice. I said, well, I'm not going to be here on Monday. Right? Yeah. And that became the story of my life. I had this job offer on a Thursday, start Monday, was a repeat thing in my career. So I started working at 3AW as the breakfast panel operator to a guy called Peter James, who is the dad of Darren James, who I work with on 3AW these days from time to time. And I poached his son, Michael James, who used to work at AW doing social media, and he's now one of the producers at Triple M.
Right. Okay.
So I've worked with 3 generations of Jameses. Did that until I realised the people on the other side of the glass were earning a shitload more than I was. And one in particular, John Blackman, the late, the great John Blackman, had recently come down from Canberra. He was working at 2CA. And he was behind the microphone and I was behind the 3 sheets of glass doing all this business. And I said, how much do you get paid? So I get paid $80 a week. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm getting 24, he's getting 80. I'm doing the hard work and he just says, this is. Yeah. I said, I'm going to go for your job. He said, oh, you don't have the voice for radio. Which in the years that followed became a recurring conversation with Blake. I still don't think you have a voice for radio. And at the time, I probably didn't. Radio changed in terms of what it was looking for. So that's how I got into radio, and I've forgotten what question led to me doing all of this. And that was 1971. Wow.
It's insane. It's incredible. 2, 3, 4.
I want to rock and roll all night. And thank FPH.
We will get back to the episode with Lee Simon in just a moment, but as Dos said, it's time to thank our naming right partner, Fleet Plan Hire Solutions. Whether you're in construction, civil, or infrastructure, you know the name because they do the biggest projects across the country.
But they don't just do they do the biggest, but they can also do the smallest and provide everything that we need for a project that we might be doing around home.
Well, Dos, I need an excavator. Where do I go?
Well, you go to Fleet Plan Hire.
I need a tip truck.
Go to Fleet Plan Hire.
I need some plan hire.
Mate, why would you call anyone else? And I think the best part about it is these things sound a bit stressful. It's not like they just drop it on your doorstep and it's like, what do I do?
How do I operate this thing?
And they look after all of it. So they operate and they take care of compliance. They ensure it's a smooth process. And you want someone in this position position to be reliable, trustworthy, and Fleet Plant Hire.
They are. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And if you guys are in that position, visit fph.com.au and let them take care of it. Now, let's get back in the episode with the lethal Lee Simon. So then, how did you then get on the other side of the glass, so to speak? When did that come?
It's still 1971, and I'm 17. I turned 18 at the end. I was a year younger than everybody at school. Somehow I started my schooling a year earlier than I should have. I don't know how. So one of the guys I replaced at 3AW had gone to Bega, 2BE in Bega, south coast of New South Wales, small country town. And he rang towards the end of that first year that I was at AW, maybe 8 or 9 months into working there. He said, there's a job going in Bega, it's on air and production. If you want the job, come and get it. It's here. That was on a Thursday, and I was on a bus to Bega the following Monday. Hated it. Missed my parents, missed my mates, missed Melbourne, missed the big city. Got a driver's license at the end of that year, like just before I went up there. Bought a car and used to drive down to Melbourne every weekend.
Wow.
3 months into working there, I was offered a job at 3DB, which was an AM station. I think it's now the one that is called Gold, or maybe the one that is now called Nova. I can't remember what 3DB became. I'm pretty sure it was Gold. And again, that was a Thursday offer to go to 3DB, and I grabbed it with both hands because it was back in Melbourne. I was there for 3 months and got an offer to go and work in Hobart. So I went down to Hobart. I was there the year that the casino opened. So that was great. A whole bunch of mainlanders, which is what I was. Tasmanians a little bit suspicious about people from the mainland. Oh, you're a mainlander, eh? And that was a bit of fun. But then I got offered a job in Newcastle. I took that. While I was in Newcastle, I was offered a job in Sydney. Took that. And then while I was in Sydney, I was offered a job back in Melbourne at 3XY, which was the station I wanted to work at from before I got into radio.
And it's funny, since we knew this interview was going to happen, everybody I've spoken to, they've all said, ask about 3XY. That's
about XY.
Well, yeah, that's what they remember. Like, that's where they talk to you.
Well, people in Melbourne in particular would remember me from that. That was 1975. So I'm 4 years into my career, and this is radio station number 5 or whatever. And I just asked all those jobs. Just happened to be the right person in the right place at the right time. And somehow people thought I had what was needed for that job. So I very quickly... I think I just turned 21 when I ended up at 3XY. And I loved it. That was 1975. I just had a ball. XY dominated music radio in particular. It had already knocked off its main competitor, a station called 3AK, which was one of the stations that I used to listen to in the 60s, along with 3UZ. But XY had a tone and an attitude that really appealed to me. There was a bit of the larrikin in being on air. The people who ran it were big risk takers, and it was all intuitive. Research was very rarely done. People got into radio, and it was the entrepreneurial risk takers who ended up doing very well out of it. And I was lucky enough to be right in the middle of this storm of fabulous radio that was happening at the back end of the 70s. Australian music had really hit its straps by then as well. 75 is when Skyhooks emerged and so many other bands. I'm kind of reluctant to mention the names of bands, and I'm sure later on you'll be asking me about people.
You don't want to miss out on anyone. You don't want to miss out on anyone.
Well, here's the thing. I know I'm going to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be driving home and I go, oh, shit. I didn't mention this person or that person. So please forgive me, anybody or any band that I don't refer to. Not because I don't want to. It's just... I'm sure it happens to you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Well, maybe with 3XY, and Danny's spoken about how, the people we've spoken to, leading into the preparation for this, what was 3XY in terms of the programming? Like, who were you speaking to? We weren't obviously listening to it. We weren't born then, but I'm keen to know what the show was like.
Okay. Radio was much broader because there were less radio stations. So at the time that I was working at 3XY, I think there were maybe 10 commercial radio stations plus the ABC. Also in the midst, Triple R had started. So credit to Triple R.
Triple R
Triple
go back
R,
that far.
mid-70s.
Wow.
And it was a radio station that came off the back of RMIT. And it was the first FM station in Melbourne. Quite often, the radio station that I went to in 1980, Eon FM, is credited as being the first FM station, certainly the first commercial FM, but Triple R was up and about. And they were very inner Melbourne, very independent, and pulled a very, very specific audience, mainly university age, for want of a better term, 18 to about 25. 3XY appealed to everybody. It was super broad. It wasn't unusual to hear Led Zeppelin, followed by Olivia Newton-John, followed by, Black Sabbath, followed by Helen Reddy, followed by Jimi Hendrix, followed by Johnny Chester. And you probably don't know every second one that I've mentioned, or maybe you do.
We love our music, Lee, so I think we do.
Artists who your parents really liked and the ones that you really liked as well. And somehow this mix of a really broad demographic, we're talking 12 years old to 50, 60 years old, all of them were 3XY listeners. And if it wasn't 3XY, it was 3DB or it was one of the other AM stations. So we played just about everything, and we were in the lucky position that once we picked something up, because we believed in it, it became a hit, because the station had enough reach in order for people to hear it, like it, go to a record store, buy it, it would chart, and it would become a hit. That kind of stopped in the years to come, where nothing would get picked up until it was researched, and research said that you should be playing it. The intuitive part of radio, the gut feel part of it, for want of a better term, was taken over by research as the years went on, and more radio stations came into the mix, and they specialised more and more. Broad demographics like that shrunk as more stations came into it. And whether it was by gender, there were the female scoot stations, the male scoot stations, the ones that were under 30 to 45, et cetera. And that's how it is today. They're very, very, very specific in who they're targeting to, and therefore what advertisers they can attract.
So I want to come back to your story and your journey in a moment, but just to break it up a little bit, talk to us a little bit about some of the bands you started interviewing around this time and that you met in person. Like, have you ever felt starstruck in those days, meeting and interviewing some of these great bands?
It's interesting. Starstruck only a handful of times where I got to interview people who in my life were the gods from when I was a kid, from when I was a teenager, not just from when I started playing their stuff. All the other bands that were super successful, whether they were Australian or British or American, and the odd European one that sort of had chart success as well, I was just doing my job. And the approach to doing those interviews was trying to get the best interview you could get, always in the back of your mind, what did I want to end up having on air? Therefore, what questions do you ask? Often, not all the time, but from time to time, no matter what you asked, you didn't get the answers you wanted. And you just can't then go on to the next question. You had to react to what they said. Also, the 70s were a pretty crazy period in terms of self-administered, mind-altering,
Yes.
and I'm talking heavy duty stuff.
Wow.
And bands, unfortunately, were right in the middle of all of that. People were dying left, right, and centre. Overdoses were tragically all too frequent. And sometimes a band would come in to do an interview off their trolley. And you would know straight away how they were, and I'm not going to name any names just in case you're about to say like who, and you did the best you could and then would spend ages editing trying to find bits and pieces that didn't make the band look and sound stupid.
Yeah.
Being starstruck though, I was lucky enough to interview all three members of Led Zeppelin, the three surviving ones. And I was just beside myself with excitement about that. Doing a press conference, not even a one-to-one, with Paul McCartney in the 70s. I was in the same room as Paul McCartney, did quite a few interviews overseas as well during the 70s. I was lucky enough to travel to America to do a run of interviews. Wow. And travelling around the States and meeting people and going to gigs over there. It was all fun. It was a bit of a hoot, and kind of had to pinch myself that this was my job. This is what I did for a living. I couldn't think of anything I would rather be doing.
What is? I'm sure you've been able to get a good understanding on what life on tour or on the road looks like for some of these bands. If you're going and traveling and speaking to a lot of them, what was it like being a rock and roller in the 70s for some of these guys, from what you've asked and learnt from them?
Very few people really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a grind. You'd leave your home, and I'm not talking about what I did. Yeah, I'd go for 2 or 3 weeks and do something and I'd be back again. But bands toured almost non-stop. So they leave their home wherever that is, in Arkansas or, Georgia or wherever, and they would disappear for months. And it was airports, hotels, gigs, airports, hotels, gigs, and after a while you'd wake up, this is them telling the story, and it's not difficult to imagine that this is what it would be like. And you had to look around, and they grabbed the room service menu on the bedside table to see what hotel they were staying at and where they were. Before going on stage, remind me, where are we? Oh, you're in Stuttgart. Good evening, Stuttgart! And being away from home and family and all of that, faced with a lot of temptations.
Sure.
Yes.
And a lot of bands succumbed is the wrong word, but took advantage of all of that, which created all sorts of issues. It was a tough life, and I don't think anybody would look back on that era who were actually involved, and I think the same would apply to bands these days that are constantly on the road. Just say it's nowhere near as sexy as anyone thinks it is. It's hard work.
Can imagine.
And bands don't make anywhere near the money they used to make back when people used to go and buy CDs and records and cassettes. Spotify killed that.
Yeah.
So these days, they have to tour a lot to get ticket sales, and merchandise is just as important. AC/DC will make just as much out of merchandise at a gig at the MCG later this year as they will in ticket sales.
Yeah.
It's how it works, because people don't buy records anymore.
No.
Bands would become squillionaires, the songwriters in particular, from record sales, and now they get their 0.8 of a cent every time somebody goes to Spotify.
It's crazy.
Connection to music has changed as well. Just a little side note, there was a time where you'd have a part-time job when you were at school, you'd save money, you go to your local record store, Gray's Lighting and Electrical, at the Northbourne Village, you'd flick through all the singles, and if you saved up enough, you'd buy an album. You go home, you put the album on, whether it was vinyl or later years cassettes. You would read every word on the liner notes. You knew the words to everything. You listened to every track because you bought an album. I might as well listen to all 12 tracks, even though it was only 1 or 2 tracks that prompted you to buy it. You knew where they recorded it, who produced it, everything. These days, music is kind of a bit like Tinder, where nah, and the algorithm works out 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds.
Didn't expect to get a Tinder reference.
No,
It's-
no.
It's difficult to get invested in your music.
Yeah.
I remember the same thing though. I remember getting a CD player for my 9th birthday.
Yep.
Got the Black Eyed Peas,
Yeah.
one of their
Did
great,
you?
one of their great albums, and I even got a CD holder, like a rack.
Yeah.
And then you'd go to the local Sanity, like the local CD
Yep.
shop, and that's where you'd go and buy your CDs.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. And then it moved to obviously, actually that might be a cool little part as well. What about legal streaming? That started happening too.
Illegal streaming.
Illegal streaming, using certain what was it called?
LimeWire.
That's it.
LimeWire. And
know?
then
Ruining
completely
computers.
ruining the...
Yeah, my mum and dad hated me.
Yeah, well, what's wrong with the PC? Oh, I downloaded such and such from LimeWire. And famously, was it Metallica, I think, took a big stand against it, which they then ended up apologising for down the track when legit streaming started.
Yeah.
But big bands like Metallica do okay out of streaming.
Yes.
But a lot of bands sort of under their level of giantness don't.
Sammy, can you get up? I want to have a look at Nightmoves, please. So we want to have a look at when you ventured into television, and we've got some footage here, Lee. Would love you to have a look
Dreading
at.
to see what it is.
He doesn't even want to look Dirty's face.
Okay.
But we just want to have a little look, and this might just set the scene a little bit. So
Thanks for joining us. Welcome to tonight's show. With me in the studio tonight, I've got Sean Kelly and James Freud. Welcome to the show once again. First of all, James, if I could start with you. Have you had any really good fucks lately? Right now, I'd like to welcome to Nightmoves a guy who's been responsible for my name
love that
being spelled
mullet.
incorrectly more than anybody else in the world.
Wasn't a mullet.
Also been involved in rock and roll there too. Red Sign.
They spelled my name wrong now too, Lee.
Oh, there you
there's
have
another
it.
classic, Dos.
How you doing?
Not bad at all.
Can't believe that's Red
First time I've spoken to you
Simons.
for quite some time.
Skyhooks?
Since you left the band.
Was that Red Simons?
Yeah.
Skyhooks? Yeah.
There we go.
Wow.
That's red.
Yeah.
Man of 1,000 hairstyles.
Wow. what do you call that hairstyle? Because you said it's not a mullet.
Extremely cool.
Yeah, cool.
A mullet has nothing going on around here.
Okay.
Okay? It's all not a lot here and a hell of a lot back
Back.
there. Genetics has caused me to have not a lot up here. But no, a mullet was a mullet.
Yes.
So, no, it wasn't a mullet. And have I said that it wasn't a mullet enough? That little grab that you had of the late James Freud and Sean Kelly, that was a prank we did on them. That never went to air.
Oh.
And I couldn't quite hear what you heard.
I couldn't hear either.
Okay, but there was a question I asked them at the end of it. We used to pre-record the show. Much later on in the history of Nightmoves, it was a pre-recorded show. And Sean and James turned up, and they thought that it was going live to air. And I'm not too sure what I could say in the context of a podcast. And, you know...
There's no rules on our end, Lee,
In
so it's-
years to come, my granddaughters will watch this and they never want to hear me say what I... Anyway, I said hello, and they were a little bit nervous and a bit edgy about the interview. And how's it going, this, that, the other. And then I asked them if they had had any good... deeply personal romantic encounters lately, which I brought down to one word. And the two of them just sat there with their jaws opening and shutting and not knowing what to say. We did that for the Christmas blooper tape. It was played at the end of the year. That clip made me a lot of money. Little side story. Got a letter in the mail one day from ITV, the British television network. Dear Mr. Simon, blah, 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 blah. We have a clip. It's you with Sean Kelly, James Freud, and it's the one where we have a X-rated version of a blooper show. We need your permission to air that clip. And the fee was £250 per time they played it. So every year for about 10 years, I would get £250 for this clip that never actually went to air.
Wow.
But it was shown all over Europe.
There you go.
That's amazing. So the reason we wanted to show that, I mean, obviously we wanted to have a look at your good looks too, but outside of that,
You idiot.
again, like Countdown and Nightmoves and these kind of shows, like, talk to us a little bit more about your memories of kind of that era. I mean, we'd love to also hear you talk about Molly as well.
Okay. There was a lot of music on television. This is before MTV. Countdown obviously was just a juggernaut. It was enormous. 6 o'clock Sunday night, the family would sit down and watch Countdown. But also there were shows like Commotion, The Go Show, Sounds Unlimited. The ABC had Rage going.
Yep.
And what happened with Nightmoves, which started in 77, I got a phone call from Michael Gudinski, who was a dear friend. And he said, what are you doing after work? And I was doing Drive on XY at the time. It's 3 till 7. He said, why? I said, I've got a meeting with Gary Fenton, who was the content director, also no longer with us, sadly, at Channel 7, and one other guy there. And they want to talk about some footage that they have and to somehow come up with a TV show where they can use that footage. So I said, yeah, no worries. So I went and picked Gudinski up from work because I refused to drive with him. Worst driver ever. Never looked ahead. So anyway, and you'll see them doing that. And we went to Channel 7 and we met with Gary Fenton and a young guy called Andrew McVitie, who passed away last year. Andrew was 21. I was 22. Gudinski was 23. Gary, a little bit older. And he said, look, we've bought all these shows from America, and when TV buys shows, other stuff comes with it. And what came with it was a series called In Concert. And it was hours and hours and hours and hours of live band performances, concert footage. He said, we've got all this stuff and we don't know what to do with it. So we just bounced around. Well, you could do a show. It would have to be a late night show because you'd have to play a fair bit of the concert. You couldn't just play 3 minutes of a song and then go on to something else. And we just freeballed a few ideas in Gary's office in Dorcas Street, not far from where we are now. And at the end of it, he said, okay, Andrew, you're the producer. Lee, you're the host. Gudinski, executive producer. You start next Friday. And it was like, I'd never done television before. Andrew was a videotape operator. He'd never produced before. Gudinski had never done it before. And we were all in our early 20s, very green. And all of a sudden we found, and what, how much? Is there a deal? Is there a contract? You work that out amongst yourselves. Gudinski, you're the executive producer. You work out the money and blah, blah, blah. And it was supposed to run in Melbourne for 7 weeks. And then we would have used up everything. They were going to sponsor. I think Ford had picked up the sponsorship. We started the following Friday. Adelaide picked it up the 2nd week. Sydney picked it up the 3rd week. Brisbane picked it up the 4th week. Hobart and Perth also picked it up. So before we got to the end of the 7 weeks, it had grown big legs. And we're all looking at each other going, oh, what happens now? Long story short, it kept on going for years.
Yeah.
Very different show to Countdown. Countdown was aimed at the top 40 market. And you just had to look at it. It was a live audience of teenage, mainly girls in the audience. And bands would get up. More often than not, they would mime their song. Molly would do what Molly did. Bless him. And then Nightmoves was sort of a counterpoint. It was referred to as the alternative rock show or the alternate rock show. I can't recall. We were aimed at a much older audience. We weren't playing top 40 hits. Countdown did a really good job of that. But it developed a really big live national Friday night audience. It was a 2-hour show, so we had the luxury of lots and lots of time to be expansive in it. You'd play 4 or 5 songs from a particular artist or a particular album. Interviews could go for quite some time. Every band that came into town did an interview on Nightmoves.
That's amazing.
And so we just asked our way into it. everybody who was involved in that show didn't do what they did in that show. A cameraman, with the exception of one of them, was a cable dragger. The floor manager was in the makeup department. Look, I'm making some of these up, but everybody, it was just a bunch of 20-somethings putting together a national TV show and just having a ball doing it. And somehow we kind of stumbled and fumbled our way through, I think, about 7 years of it.
Wow.
It went to Channel 10 for a while, and it finished up as a Saturday morning show on Channel 9, and it was doomed when that happened. It bore no resemblance to what it was before. In the meantime, and I love Molly to bits, and he just lives around the corner from where we are. And I knew Molly a lot back in the 70s. Who didn't? Everybody knew Molly. He was in your lounge room every week. And I knew him before Countdown. You know, he was a journalist. He wrote for Go Set. Famously went and worked for Apple with the Beatles. Has got one of the most extraordinary CVs. He was a brilliant producer. Had a great ear. And there were so many Australian hits that he was responsible for in the studio. Whether it was The Real Thing by Russell Morris or other bands along the way that he actually produced as well as played them on air. And I would hope that in years to come, the Molly that everybody remembers is that Molly and not perhaps the more recent iteration of Molly, who keeps pretty much to himself these days, enjoying life. He's now in his 80s. Has been through, his CV is just astonishing. Much respect and much love for the guy.
Yeah.
Well said. You mentioned also the late Michael Gudinski.
Yes.
And you said you were in your early 20s together.
Yep.
Did you, I'm sure you became really, really close friends. Did you see in those early years, okay, this guy is he's gonna make it one day? Obviously where he became an icon as well in the music space. But could you sense that in those early years?
Yeah, actually I could. I was aware of him because of his involvement in Sunbury and the early days of Mushroom, and also the early days of his touring company, which was called Evans Gudinski. He and a guy called Ray Evans put that together. And Michael had hits with fiercely independent Australian bands, whether it was Metal Lake or the Dingoes and Ayers Rock and numerous other bands, and was doing okay with that. Then Skyhooks emerged, and that was the end of 74, the beginning of 75, which is when and I was working in Sydney at the time, and Michael turned up with Skyhooks at 2SM, which was the Sydney equivalent of 3XY. And what Melbourne people have said to you about what XY was like in that era, that's what 2SM was to Sydney. And Michael turned up with Skyhooks, and I was immediately drawn to him as he was to me. We were kind of kindred spirits, pretty loose, rebellious, disrespectful in many ways. And just having a ball, and could not believe that we were doing the job that we were doing. So there was a connection very early in the piece. Also, the person who is my wife was working with Gudinski at that time. I hadn't met Jan at this stage. Jan was working with Michael when his empire had 4 people working there. So Jan was very early days, early 70s, when Mushroom was first starting. So when I moved to Melbourne, it was inevitable that we would spend a lot of time together, and our families did that for a long time.
We've heard you speak about some of these guys and then working later down the track with, I think, Molly doing a breakfast morning show and basically coming straight from nightclubs and coming off, no sleep. When you were involved in this, were you part of the party lifestyle and hanging with all these bands and people, or were you kind of not part of it as much?
Less so if you're talking about that era when Molly was doing breakfast radio. We're now talking about the 80s.
Yep.
And we're talking about Eon FM. And by that stage, I'd sort of moved up in the responsibility stakes.
Yes.
I was the content director of the radio station, and I had responsibilities and obligations that prevented me from hitting it quite as hard as I did in the 70s. It didn't mean that I was living, a very sedate 9-to-5 life and rarely went out. But the partying was a little bit more grown up maybe than it was in the 70s.
But is being part of that culture, does that play a big role in your professional life too? Like building relationships with people in the scene through partying and nightlife?
Well, it did in a number of ways. First of all, my love of being on air on radio was driven by my love of music. And I was always a music jock while I was on air, as in disc jockey, not jock as in sports jock, never was one of those. And I was lucky enough to actually be embroiled in all of that, albeit in a peripheral kind of sense. And there was this sort of uneasy relationship in some cases, not in all, between musicians and radio people, because musos knew that without radio airplay, their careers wouldn't be on the trajectory that it was.
Yep.
Bands needed radio to have airplay to promote what they did, and therefore the success followed. And it's not surprising that there was sort of we were just, you're just parasites on the edge of it, but we kind of were. We were a sort of a side industry, but heavily involved in it. And so that lifestyle obviously rubs off in that you're going to gigs a lot, you're going to after parties, and you're going to album launches and record company receptions and that world. And it was busy and it was exciting. It's showbiz. And therefore it rubbed off on those of us who were passionate about our music. And all the guys working on air, men and women working on air on Eon FM, all loved their music, constantly at gigs. And so the two kind of meshed together.
Yeah.
And there were also people who were in bands who ended up having a solid radio career when they decided to step away from it. And they did very well doing what they did there. You saw a little clip of Red Simons before from his Skyhooks days. Super successful broadcaster on ABC radio for quite some time, but not to do with music. He stepped totally away from that as far as his media career is concerned. I'm giving you very long answers.
No, this is great.
Sorry.
We're loving it, mate. It's really, really good. Did you? I'm sure you did. But did you ever interview Freddie Mercury?
No.
Who's someone that you didn't get to interview that you would have loved to chat with?
John Lennon. John Bonham. I got to interview the other three, but Led Zeppelin. He was the drummer in Led Zeppelin. Pete Townsend from The Who. But I also got to interview other people who I have on the highest of pedestals, Bruce Springsteen.
The boss.
And I interviewed him in America very early in the piece as well, 75, 76. So wasn't as, he was already big, but nowhere near the mega act that he very rapidly went on to become. But you could see that he was heading that way. You asked before about whether when I first met Gudinski, if I could see that he was heading for the mogul of music that he did become. Yeah, I could see that from day dot. I think everybody in his orbit could see that nothing was going to stop him from doing that. I digress. So, yeah, I did get to speak to a lot of my heroes, but missed out on quite a few of them as well.
Did any surprise you interviewing some of these people? Did they surprise you in a way of either their persona on stage or in the music world was one way, but they're either, I don't know, incredibly intelligent or articulate, or the opposite? They might be rude, or did you ever walk in and just walk away going, I'm disappointed or I'm ecstatic or whatever that just shocked you?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Seriously. There are artists who I enjoyed playing their music, had bought their stuff early in the piece, programmed them, got to meet them and interview them, and thought, geez, rude. People who gave you one-word answers clearly didn't want to be there. And I can imagine for some artists, when you're interview number 15 for the day in that city, and they just did it where they were 4 days ago and a week ago and a month ago, and it becomes a bit of a grind.
Did you try and make it different though?
Well, you did. I never asked an artist when they had just landed, interviewing them at the airport when they first arrived, what do you think of Australia? You know, often there'd be an all-in media conference, and the newspapers, all of whom had a music person involved, but often that person was doing something else. So the person doing political rounds would go to interview a band, and they'd be interviewing, I don't know, Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull, but call him Jethro. Pink Floyd famously in one of their songs say, "Oh, by the way, which one's pink?" And that was based on a question that a journalist asked when they were all there being interviewed. So you can kind of get that some of the people you interviewed were a bit testy and really just, looking at their watch, couldn't wait to get to the end of it. Others were really up for a chat and interested in the questions you were asking, and happily went over the time that had been allocated.
Can you name some of them?
One-on-ones.
Can you name some of them?
Robert Plant
Oh, wow.
had been allocated 20 minutes to interview him, as was the case with Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones. But 3 different venues, 2 on one day, and he had said no to doing an interview. And I interviewed John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page on one day, and then the record company, this is in England, rang me up at the hotel that night and said, "Oh, Robert Plant has now said, yes, I'll do the interview." Why he said that, I don't know. He may have spoken to the other guys. And we did it at a pub in Princess Hill, which is an area just outside of London, 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'd set up in a room upstairs at the pub. The pub wasn't open at the time. And we're sitting downstairs waiting for, and just walking down this suburban street, it's like, holy shit, it's Robert Plant. And he came in and introduced himself. Lovely, just an absolute gentleman. And he and I went off into a room, and the record company person said, I'll just open the door at the 20-minute mark to let you know you need to wrap it up. So we went in there and started chatting, and the 20-minute mark came around and the door opened, and he just said, "Oh, I'm okay, we'll keep going." And we kept going for about an hour off the back of that.
That's amazing.
Because he was really chatty.
Yeah.
And I think as an interviewer, the best thing you could do is be a good listener and pay attention to the answers and not be obsessed with, they've just dropped some sort of really interesting bit in their response, and you've just moved on to the next question without taking them up on that. So that's one example. And there were others, thankfully, along the way who were quite happy to hang around and chat some more.
Yeah. I mean, you must look back and be somewhat, of course you'd be proud of everything you've achieved in your.
Not everything. No, that's balanced.
Yeah, okay.
If I can see where your question is headed, there were some disasters along the way. Honestly.
Would you be? Come on, you brought it up. You brought it up.
No.
What's? I'll rephrase it then. So, had there been an interview where you may have regretted? A question you might have said, or you feel like, oh shit, I wish I poked a little bit more, or I said the wrong thing there, or did the potential or the fellow guest blow up, or weren't happy with something? Was there ever a moment that'll stick with you?
Broadly speaking, yes. I mean, obviously, if you do enough of them,
there
are going to be ones that you are proud of,
yeah,
because that went really well. And there are ones where I thought, oh, that was a good interview and got the job done. That was great. There are others where, oh God, that was hard work, but I've got enough. And others which was, what a complete waste of time that was. And walking away with my tail between my legs thinking, I should have done a better job of that. Sometimes my fault that it wasn't a good interview, and other times it was just the guest was giving me absolutely nothing. And I got to the point where I'll give you one.
Yeah, we're fishing here, aren't we? Yeah.
And it wasn't me doing the interview. And do I name them or don't I name them?
Name him, Bob.
I'll name them. The band was the Human League, very
Okay,
big in the
yes.
80s. And it was led by a guy called Phil Oakey, with the asymmetrical haircut. There was a time where it was really long on one side, he says, bumping the microphone very unprofessionally here, again, and very short on the other side. And he turned up with the record company person who was a woman called Sandra Robinson, who I've known forever, really good at her job, one of many very powerful, very good women working in the record industry. And we had a guy called John Peters doing Drive. And John was a huge fan of British music, a huge fan of he was an aficionado and very good at what he did. And they turned up to do an interview with John Peters, and I was the PD, the program director. Sandra and Phil Oakey come into the building, and I showed Phil Oakey down to the studio where John was. John gets up, hi, nice to meet you. Whatever. And you could tell straight away that he didn't want to be there. And the interview started, and he was giving literally one-word answers. Or would just grunt or nod, which is really good radio when somebody just nods or shakes their head. It's like, it's radio, for God's sake. Say something. So JP pulled that first part of the interview to a pretty quick stop and went into a song. I walked down to the studio and opened the door and I said, oh, excuse me, you, fuck off. And he looked at me and said, what? I said, leave. You don't want to be here? Go. Leave. Now. Oh, no, you don't have to be. Go. Leave. JP, done. Finished. We don't need to deal with this shit. You don't want to be here, so don't be here. Go. And poor old Sandra's followed me down. She was in my office listening to it. And I said, we're not doing this. And I said, oh, do you have that? They left and went downstairs. 5 minutes later, Sandra comes back upstairs again. Would you consider letting him back in the studio again? I said, why? He's not very happy with how he was. I said, well, he's got every right to not be happy with how he was. You don't do that. You don't say yes to doing something and then you turn up and do that. That was just really shit radio. I said, if he promises to actually give us something, absolutely. So back upstairs in the studio, did great stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So happy ending for what was a pretty crap beginning. But I'd gotten to the point at that point where we just don't have time for this. We don't. And by this, that sort of behaviour. You're a guest in the house. You don't do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to keep going, but I want to ask about the Triple M Footy too.
Can we do that?
Yeah. So
What do you want to ask about?
the Triple M Footy.
Oh,
Because
yes.
that's obviously, I mean, like we said to you, we've had the privilege of interviewing many greats of Triple M over our journey, and they all reference you.
Actually, I want you to start by telling Lee what you heard the other day about the Triple M Live on Air when they mentioned Lee.
Well, I heard a little thing recently, as of last couple of weeks on air, that I don't know how true this is, but things went wrong. The feed kept cutting out during the broadcast of the footy. And it was just, I don't know what technically went wrong. I have no idea, but it just kept cutting out the midstream, off air, on air, off air, on air. And the reference was made that had that been, that they were lucky they had that particular producer in the chair, because had that been Lethal Lee Simon, a few people might have been on the end of a nasty spray. Is there,
Yeah, look, and I'm sure you've posed the question very diplomatically, and you probably heard a much more aggressive version of that, and a much more accurate one. I had this alter ego, as it turns out. More often than not, I was Lee Simon, but every now and then Len Simpson appeared. And if I'd been pushed the wrong way enough, Lee took a break and Len took over. And yeah, I didn't tolerate avoidable mistakes. The unavoidable ones, that's just par for the course. That happens. There's a lot of technology and lots of moving parts in putting a broadcast together. But when people haven't done the correct checks before going on air, hadn't road tested the OB prior to you're on, and hadn't detected that this was an issue that emerged as soon as we went on air, and had someone done their work properly, wouldn't have been an issue, because there's a little side story to this. So yeah, Lee wouldn't have behaved very well. And there are times along the way where I regret the way I was with people when they got something wrong, but it was never the first time they got something wrong. And actually not really the second time, but do it 3 times. And I used to think, well, you're taking the piss now.
Yeah.
And they knew that I wasn't really happy about it. And I wish I'd been more level-headed and hadn't let my Greek, passionate, emotional background, not giving that as an excuse, but we are a pretty volatile lot, our lot, as most Southern Europeans are. And I'd go volcanic about things sometimes, I'm ashamed to say.
Well, that at least clears up what we were talking. But having said that, but that wasn't where we got
to deny it. And on the subject of mistakes, it's amazing how listeners will keep listening, waiting for it to get better.
Yeah.
One of the highest rating 7 o'clock news on ABC TV was when they could not get it to air, and all that existed for 30 minutes was a slide that said, we are experiencing technical problems, we will resume normal broadcasting as soon as they're fixed. People stuck with it for 30 minutes, looking at this thing, waiting for the car crash to be resolved and to find out that nobody was hurt.
Excitement.
That makes sense.
Sorry.
No. Well, all it was, I mean, because we've heard there's that, and thank you for being so open about that. But I mean, everybody we've spoken to has said what an absolute gentleman you are, and we've experienced the same thing. But again, you are a pioneer of football, and especially in the FM radio space. So we know you've had a lot to do with likes of Eddie McGuire, for example, and these guys that are legends of, now legends of radio, especially in the football broadcasting space. But maybe just talk a little bit about those early thoughts that you had, or visions you had for what it could be, and how it's now what we're all grown up with and is normal to us, the steps you had to take to put it in place.
Okay. As a program director, and there's no genius involved in that, even though I'm given the credit for it because I'm the guy who did it. It wasn't that, some bolt of lightning came out, the clouds parted and the angels sang and a ray of light hit me with this epiphany. Our audience for 6 months of the year on weekends evaporated. Pretty easy to see. Survey books come out and you've got your day-by-day, quarter-hour by quarter-hour figures that come through, and your Monday to Sunday figures, your Saturday figures, everything dissected 1,000 different ways. And we had a really good audience 7 days a week for 6 months of the year, and we had a great Monday to Friday audience, Monday to Friday night audience for the other 6 months of the year. Didn't take a lot of brains to work out where they had gone to, which was to listen to the AFL broadcasters. But nobody on a music radio station, especially an FM station, had ever thought about putting sport to air, live sport. So in 96, I put a presentation together and went to the those above me and said, I want to start doing, I want to apply for an AFL broadcast licence and start doing footy every weekend in Melbourne. No, you can't do it. There's no such thing. Give me an example of a radio station anywhere on the planet that is a music station that stops the music every weekend for 6 months and does live sport. I said, well, there isn't one, but we have no advertising, no revenue on Saturdays and Sundays during the footy season. We used to do commercial-free hours because there were no commercials. So we'd promote what was a negative and then actually ended up sponsoring our commercial-free hours. Side story. So year one, no. And I went up to the board and the board said, no, you can't do it. It will never work. It will never work. I was convinced that it would. And I had an idea of what it should sound like. We had dabbled with sports shows prior to that. In the 80s, we had the Gunner Club, which was who's going to win, who's going to do this, and that was Laurie Serafini and Stephen Ick, two AFL players who happened to be sales guys at the station. In the early 90s, we had a show called The Grill Team on a Saturday morning, which I'd given the green light to. And Eddie McGuire, who was doing stuff with the D generation at that time in the morning and doing his Channel 10
news stuff,
reporting, so to speak. Maybe he'd moved on from that by this stage. But there was a Saturday morning show that was Eddie, Roland Roccacelli, Trevor Marmalade, Bridget Duclos got involved in it, Sergio Paradise, a guy called Steve Marshall as Sergio Paradise, Matt Quartermain from Empty Pockets, which was a comedy duo, all got together on a Saturday morning and did this sports show, which was predominantly football with some comedy thrown in. 2 years later, the footy show starts on Channel 9, Eddie McGuire, Trevor Marmalade, and I think anybody involved at that time would acknowledge that the genesis of that show was on a Saturday morning. Go forward to the end of the 90s. Year one, no, won't happen. I'm stubborn, and I don't like taking no for an answer if I really believe in something. I'm not that stubborn. So I had another crack at it the following year. And the difficulty was there were no precedents. I couldn't say, look, here's an example of it. There was nothing. It was just, trust me, it's going to work. And how much is it going to cost? I don't know. I hadn't approached the AFL to find out. Wayne Jackson was running the AFL at the time. This is before Andrew Demetrio took it over in the early 2000s. And I was given sort of a green light to go and find out more about it. Went and met with Wayne Jackson, lovely person. He asked me, okay, if you were to do this, how do I know you're not just going to butcher the existing audience? And I said, well, we're just not, because there are people who don't listen to footy, probably because they don't like the offerings that are there at the moment.
Yes.
We're going to do it in a way which is going to bring in a different audience. He accepted that. He gave me a figure. I went back to the station. I said, okay, we can do it. This is what it's going to cost. Just have to go back and say, yes, we'll do it. And we said, yes, and we'll do it. Then I had another battle on my hands. The management at the station had their own idea of what the commentary team should be and what it should sound like. And in fact, somebody gave me a manila folder with their thoughts. They weren't programming people, but they had risen through the ranks, and I won't go to who they were in the place. And the commentary team was long established older blokes who were doing football at other stations and doing a pretty good job of it ratings-wise. Sounded nothing like what I had in mind. I wanted younger people doing it, Eddie McGuire was a walk-up start for it, as were a few others at that particular time. So our debut lineup went to air that year, and it was on FM. Technology-wise, we turned up with the Starship Enterprise. The other stations had a look at the gear that we bought into the place to do it in stereo, FM quality, with no telephones involved with the rooms. We had kits in the rooms. We had people at every ground with equipment that was plugged in. They sounded like they were in the room with you. The only part that was stereo was the crowd.
Yeah.
But if you flick from AM to FM, it went from this, and this is me for those listening, not watching, my hands very close together, to just filling up the room. All of a sudden, you're at the G. You're at Colonial Stadium, as it was when it opened.
Yeah.
And it gained an audience very quickly.
It went nuts. And we were one of those, growing up. That shows, or not that show, Triple M Footy on a Saturday morning. It literally takes me back to my grandparents' house, being outside. It's playing on the radio. My dad's doing the lawns. It literally takes me back to a smell. That sound.
Yeah.
It's just so nostalgic, and what you guys created. It's just amazing.
Well, the good thing is, or the even better thing is, there were those of us who were responsible in putting it together and getting it up off the ground, giving birth to it, I suppose. We recruited really well. And after a little while, realised that they know more about what they're comfortable doing on air. If you're going to hire tall people, don't micromanage, which I did to start with. And then eventually, when you've got people like James Brayshaw in the room and Eddie McGuire, and I want to apologise right here, right now, for not mentioning names that I ought to be mentioning. But
Sam Newman.
Sorry?
Sam Newman,
one of the greatest people I've ever had the privilege of working with. Bit fractious, the relationship at times, but not that he needed me to leap to his defence ever. But people go, Sam Newman, he's a bit of a dickhead, or this. Smartest person, one of, that I've ever known. And there are two versions. There's John Newman and there's Sam Newman. Very intelligent, very articulate, very well educated, and with an incredible sense of entertainment and show business. So Sam's one of them, who I proudly mention. BT, beautiful, lovable BT. Big, burly, the bristle, the angry man. And we've all seen footage of him as a player, with shaking his fist at the umpires and getting furious and whatever. He's not that person. And you've spoken with him, you've met him, you know him. He is just a wonderful human being. And I get really upset when you read in the paper, there are those who wake up every day and pick up a pitchfork and try and work out who am I going to skewer, who does something that I do not have the ability to do. I have never done it. I've never attempted to out loud describe what's happening on a ground while it's happening. But I hate you and I hate you. I like you and I hate you. And BT, unfortunately, not surprisingly, attracts a very wide array of commentary and thoughts from the unwashed.
Yes.
I love him on air. I love him. He has just got a way with words, and he's what I call a power caller. He can take a game and grab it by the neck and just call the living daylights out of it. Not when the game's a crap game, but when it's flying, there's very few who can do what BT does. Obviously, there are others who can, but they're few and far between. And great expressions. He has quoted. I once rang him up and said, he referred to somebody who was limping on the ground. He's like a trailer with a broken axle. And BT sounds nothing like that. I don't know why I did that. But I love that expression. There was the famous line in the Sand game, Hawthorn-Essendon, where it was on. Fists were flying. The bad old days of football where none of us liked it when that happened. But I think it was Campbell Brown was laying into somebody on the ground. And all the other guys in the box had just sat back and let BT call it. Because And BT described Campbell Brown's there looking like he's trying to start a lawnmower. And you've got to visualise the action of starting a lawnmower. And it was him laying in a Matthew Lloyd or something. I don't know who it was. And BT just rises to those occasions beautifully. I love him on air. That's my little BT tribute, and I should be doing them for everybody.
I was just going to say, like, when I think of Triple M, I think of James Brayshaw. And when you mention BT in that moment, I think of JB in the exact same manner. There's a Collingwood Richmond and Jake King, and they used to call him Push Up King. And, you know, they're getting in a melee and it's push up. Like, it was just the best.
By the way, Lee, were you just out of, I know it's a bit of a side note, we were privileged enough to chat with Sam as well. And it was, again, people always ask us, what's he like? And how you described him, we can't say anything other like complete gentleman, really nice bloke, incredibly intelligent. But he does tell the classic story when he told somebody on air that they're a fuckwit.
Yes.
Were you involved in that in terms of management at that time? Or?
Absolutely. And if I can, I want to get back to JB shortly because I want to give credit where it's due. And JB's just a freak in what he did and what he has brought to Triple M football and the art of calling a game and being an entertainer. I'm driving down Punt Road on this day that you're talking about, and I was heading for, I don't know what it was called at the time. I was doing the Saturday night game at the Telstra Colonial Stadium.
One of them.
Whatever. And I'm coming down from Bridge Road next to the Richmond Football Club, heading down to make the turn to make my way past the G toward, and there's Sam on air, and it was the beginning of the review. So game had finished and they had another hour and a bit to go before throwing to the other team. And somebody came through and made his comments on the game, and Sam disagreed. And this guy decided, well, what do you know, Sam Newman? And he argued the opposite point. And Sam said, as you quite accurately put it, and you, sir, are a fuckwit. And did I just hear what I think I heard? I was a content director and executive producer of football. So I was the boss, in inverted commas, of Triple M football, as well as being the content director of the station.
That's very good.
Or maybe I wasn't at that time. I can't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Footy was my thing. Gary Pert was our general manager.
Yes.
And I picked up the bat phone and rang Purdy. He was at a barbecue. G'day, mate, says Purdy. I love Purdy. A brilliant general manager. And the only general manager I worked with who had the credentials to comment and give an opinion on how our football broadcasts were going, who never did. Never did. That's your job. And I love him for that. So, what's going on? I said, oh, where are you at the moment? He said, oh, I'm at a barbecue or wherever he was. I said, Sam just resigned on air. I said, what do you mean? He's just given notice on air. I said, what did he say? I quit. What did he say? I said, no, he called the listener a fuckwit. Oh. And this was a Saturday. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, we'll get Sam in and we'll have a chat. Which we did. Sam turned up. He knew exactly what was going to happen. And I think when he said that, he knew what the outcome was going to be. I think Sam had had enough, which he had done a few times in the past. You don't, as a Geelong player, go and train at Punt Road Oval with the Richmond guys without the word getting back to Geelong that you... So he turned up, and what did he turn up? He goes, I'm here to tender my resignation. Right? It was a very brief meeting. He was an absolute gentleman about it. I hated the fact that we had to let him go, but I think he'd had enough of what Triple M Footy was like at that time, and I might have been a part of that reason as well. Maybe, maybe not. There were other elements of it as well, but he was ready to move on to do something else.
And you wanted to give JB his flowers, you were saying.
JB was working in Adelaide on the sister station of Triple M in Adelaide as the sport guy. And I'd heard him on a couple of occasions when I was in Adelaide doing what I did for my job. And I thought, I want this guy to be on Triple M Footy. So I asked my boss at the time, the total national head of content, can I have the guy who is on SAFM, the more female side of the duopoly in Adelaide, can he call Triple M Footy? He said, well, you can't have James Brayshaw on the Triple M side and also on SAFM. I said, what if everyone calls him JB. What if we don't call him James Brayshaw, just call him okay. So JB came on board and, long story short, completely rewrote the book on how to call a game of football and how to do a pre-game and how to do halftime and how to do a post-game. And I alluded to this earlier on when I said people came into Triple M football either on air or as producers. Luke Tunnicliffe's another example of that. Early days, a guy called Steve Pritchard and others along the way. And they shaped the way the Triple M football ended up moving and the direction in which it now ultimately sits and continues to evolve. And when you hear callers early days on other radio stations doing JB-isms, sold candy, this way, that way, Jim had 400 ways of saying the same thing and used all of them. You'll rarely hear him say, kick the ball. The word kick does not come up in his vocabulary, which in a game where
We kick.
kick is a pretty important part of it. He's got 1,000 other ways of describing it. And he's also very generous on air. If he sees that somebody is moving in a particular direction and doing he'll just back off and let it happen. He is a great conductor of what goes on in the box, as well as obviously a brilliant caller, and sets a great example to everybody else in how to do it. And again, there's a love-hate relationship with Jim, which I don't understand. Oh, I don't like his voice. It's too screechy. I'll deal with it.
Well, that's when, they're doing something that's really great, is when you have people that don't like it. If everyone liked it, he probably wouldn't be much good. I feel like that's the definition of someone who's successful in that
If
industry.
you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough.
Exactly, yeah.
Anybody say, oh, no, I've had a flawless career. Well, how safe was the way you played it? What risks did you take along the way? I remember turning up at a meeting that we had in the building, and somebody with the whiteboard marker and the whiteboard said, now, we're going to brainstorm, or I think they called it, we're going to have a rainstorm of ideas, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. And I was a bit of a salty old curmudgeon at these meetings. And, there is.
Yeah.
I've had them. Lots of them. Some that I nipped in the bud beforehand and others that took me a little while to work out. So there are things like bad ideas, and time's short. Yeah. Who likes long meetings? How many meetings have you been to in your life where that could have been done with an email?
Yeah. Yep.
Or the last 30 minutes of that 35-minute meeting could have been done in the first 5.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Well, we better move on
It's
to
time for a
Rexel.
shocking
I've
confection.
noticed your watch has got 2 zeros on it. Is that because the countdown of how
I think it's broken, actually.
Is that because you'd put 30 or something and we're already way past?
We're at 1 point. We're at 1.5 hours at the moment.
How are you going to cut this down to what it needs to be?
Don't worry.
Don't worry. I think we're going to
to
leave it. This is
No,
perfect.
you're not.
This is good. No, we will. That's what. But we got to do. It's time to enter the confession booth, Lee Simon, and this is a segment brought to you by our friends at Rexel, Shocking Confessions DOS. But before we get into it,
Rexel, they are Australia's #1 electrical wholesaler, 127 stores nationwide. Everything you need electrical-wise, these guys have it, and 100 years.
100 years they've been going, these guys, and like Dos said, if you want it, they've got it, and you don't even have to be a Sparky either. You could just be doing a little reno in your house or Might just need a power board or something.
Also, they've got a recharged and rewired app. Download the Rexel app today to find your local store, and anything you need in it is in that app.
Yes, and like I said, if you don't speak the lingo, just use the chat box. They've put a lot of time and effort into that, and it is absolutely pristine. But
They're the best of the business.
they're the best of the business. That's all we had to say. Now, Lee, so we've asked you to come up with a shocking confession. This could be something that the public may not know, and then across the span of your career, we just love to know, or life, what you can confess to us today.
Okay, well, and when you asked, I thought, oh, shit, what? And there are some things that come under that category, but not in a million years.
Yeah. Not on air.
And shocking, I don't know that's shocking. And confession kind of implies that you've been guilty of something and you're confessing to it. And but then you said to me, I said, look, I can't think of anything that qualifies as shocking, with all due respect to your sponsor. But there are things that perhaps people don't know about me.
Could I ask then, in just one word, who is the most shocking interview you've conducted? Not in terms of shocking as in poor, just shocked you.
Iggy Pop.
That's a very good one.
Iggy Pop. Mad as a snake. That was one. Lou Reed.
Oh, yes.
Who I thought would be like that. Came in and did an hour with me on air. He chose all the music, turned up with a little small thing the size of an album, opened it, took out the albums, had little bits of paper in it, side 2, track 3, this, that, the other.
Wow.
Opened up a pill jar with 1,000 different coloured pills, poured them out randomly in his hand, sculled them, and away we went. And waiting outside was a gorgeous woman in a blue shimmering dress, Rachel. He introduced me to her. We did the gig, went out on the town that night. This is 2SM in Sydney.
With Lou Reed?
19 or 20 at the time. And I'm out on the town with Lou Reed, the record company person, Annie Wright from RCA Records, Mike Drayson, who was the content director of the station at the time, and we went to the illegal casinos. Sydney nightlife back then was crazy. I noticed during the night that the extremely attractive Rachel had a bit of after 5 o'clock shadow coming through. No. And naive little Greek boy from North Balwyn, Lee Simon, all of a sudden the dots joined and I realised that she famously is the person referred to in the song Walk on the Wild Side.
No!
Shaved the legs and he was a she.
Yeah.
I said, hey, babe, take a walk on the wild side. I met the babe.
Wow.
And went out on the town.
There you go.
So, again,
What a story.
that wasn't shocking as in shock horror.
No.
But it was just another awakening for
I tell
me.
you what, I think Rexel going to be very happy with that one. That's amazing, Lee.
Okay.
That's a good
Great
one.
story.
Well, we've got some presents for you now, courtesy of Rexel will come out later, but we'll start with our goodie bag partners, Lee. We don't want to send you home empty-handed. So, Dos, the first one's Milkman.
So this is Milkman Australia, Lee. So Milkman, they're number one, all things men's natural grooming. So their catchphrase, don't smell like chemicals, smell like confidence, not chemical.
Oh, thank you.
That's a
they're
good
all
little
natural.
travel bag. You're
Do,
going
do
travelling.
they have stuff for the older gentlemen?
All of us gentlemen need to
check it out.
smell lovely. So you've got a body wash in there, bit of hair gel as well.
Lee's
and
about to go to Europe too.
Beard oil.
beard oil, beautiful. Oh, you got a good little stubble there. That's perfect
go
for the beard
Milkman.
oil.
Thank you very much
No
indeed.
worries.
And there's a little travel bag
And a
for
very
you.
handy bag, and I'm doing a bit of travelling soon, so
Perfect.
This will be. Oh, thank you.
No
It's even
worries.
got a little side pocket.
They've got plenty of other products as well on their website. So Milkman Australia.
Thank you very much.
Use the code dos&d to get 20% off.
Next one for you, Lee. And this is again, we spoke about your travels, and now we've got Russell Athletic and Mitch Dowd coming over now. So
But wait, there's more.
Oh,
Yes.
mate, there's more. There's plenty more. So
thank you.
Inside there, mate, they've got, I think this is Mitch Dowd, which is looking after you
Am I
today.
allowed to
Go for it, mate. Well,
Oh,
but
look at
there's
these.
some jammies for you. They'll keep you nice and warm in the winter.
Thank you very much.
But no, there should be in there some.
I think what every cool person wears when they're sleeping for 13 hours on a plane.
Yeah.
Well, they're very comfy, mate.
Oh,
They pride
looky,
themselves
looky.
on. They pride themselves on comfort, and of course, the dos&d viewers.
Socks!
There you go, mate.
There you
Socks.
go.
Who doesn't need socks?
I know.
And they're the best, mate. They're bamboo, so nice and comfy for you. Use the code dos&d40 on Mitch Dowder or Russell Athletic. I'm actually wearing the Russell Athletic sweatshirt.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Moment.
Thank you so much.
No worries. And then we've got
Oh, there's more.
there's
There's
more.
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 Jeez.
Bring in supplements.
Bring in the steak knives.
Yeah, feels like an infomercial, doesn't it? Supplements are leading the way in all things supplement gummies. So high performance gummies are done by Sup. Head to supplements.com. You've got the creatine, you've got the L-carnitine, you've got the pre-workout,
The power one.
the pre-workout,
The pre-workout.
you've got the BCAA.
Have you got the didn't end up going to workout one? The one where you feel guilty about not doing the workout?
Well, you
mate,
can
I tell
enjoy
you
those.
what. I tell you what. Once you eat one, they taste like lollies. Dos and I were given some the other day.
be careful.
We got filmed so quickly that you got to be careful. But they might get you in the mood for a nice little walk when you're in Italy or wherever you're going, Greece or.
Anyone listening or watching, you hit the gym and you take your recovery and performance seriously, head to supplements.com.
Yes.
Use the code dos&d for 30% off all their supplement range. It's not just these, it's also plenty of other options on the website too.
And if not, check them out at Coles or Chemist Warehouse
Should I
too.
be angling these towards the
Oh, that's
camera?
perfect.
That's fine, yeah, mate. You know what you do.
Are
And
you
then
gonna do cutaways, are you?
yeah.
There we go.
And just to finish off, Lee, naming right partner, Fleet Plan Hire Solutions. Rexel's in there. You don't have to go through this bag, but our naming right, Fleet Plan Hire Solutions. They love their golf, mate. So if you play golf or anybody in your family or your friendship circle does, they've got some balls, some tees, a gloves, a towel. In the side, the Rexel box, mate, there's some chocolate for you and a few little goodies from our electrical wholesaler
Oh,
friends.
that's awesome.
So we just didn't want to send you
It's
home.
Christmas in June.
It is, mate. It is. So it was
look,
our little way of saying thank
Thank
you.
you, guys, and thank you to you wonderful sponsors for being so generous and lovely and kind.
No,
Well, mate,
we're the ones who are super grateful, Lee. We're so grateful you've taken the time to be so open with us. And yeah, mate, we've absolutely loved it. It's been great.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me along. And my apologies in advance to whoever's got to edit this.
That's that man over there.
You got a big. Have you been doing a shot list while I've been crapping on?
Jared.
Oh God, you'll be putting lines through them there.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It's been a ball. Thank you.